You'll babysit the kids while we travel. We leave tomorrow morning. My sister Vanessa said it across the Christmas dinner table, as casually as if she were telling me to pass the gravy. I stared at her. Excuse me. We booked a 6-day trip, she said. Derek and I need some time away. We'll drop the kids off around 8. She hadn't asked me. She hadn't even mentioned the trip before that moment. No, I said. Every fork at the table seemed to stop at once. Mom looked at me like I'd just insulted someone. Lilian, don't ruin Christmas over something so small. Dad frowned. Your sister actually has responsibilities. You can help her for 6 days. I was 32 years old, working full-time, with plans and responsibilities of my own. But because I was single and didn't have children, my family had somehow decided my time belonged to everyone else. Vanessa actually laughed. You're upset because I didn't ask nicely. No, I'm saying I'm not babysitting. Her smile barely moved. We'll see you at 8. That was when something changed. Not in Vanessa. In me. I looked at her and said quietly, I won't be available. Vanessa leaned back in her chair. You always say that when you're annoyed. You'll calm down. Mom jumped in immediately. Those are your niece and nephew, Lilian. What kind of aunt refuses to help her own family at Christmas? An aunt who wasn't asked. Dad shook his head. There you go again, making everything about yourself. I almost defended myself. That was what I usually did. I would explain my work schedule, explain my plans, explain that I loved the kids, explain that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, and eventually I would become so exhausted by the argument that I would surrender. Then I noticed something beside Vanessa's chair. 2 small overnight bags. One blue, one red. Both completely packed. I looked from the bags to Vanessa. You already packed their things. Vanessa took another sip of wine. Obviously, our flight is tomorrow. My stomach tightened. This wasn't Vanessa assuming I might agree. She had prepared everything before telling me, because my answer had never mattered. I pushed my chair back. Mom stared at me. Where are you going? Home. Lilian, sit down. I picked up my coat instead. Vanessa called after me. Don't forget 8 o'clock. I slipped my arms into my coat. Dad muttered, she'll get over it. Then Mom raised her voice. 8 o'clock tomorrow, Lilian. Don't make this ugly. My hand rested on the front door. For once, I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I simply looked back at them and said, I won't. 20 minutes later, I was driving home while Vanessa was probably telling everyone I'd cool off by morning. But there was one thing none of them seemed to notice. I wasn't angry anymore. I was almost relieved. Because Vanessa thought she knew exactly what would happen when she arrived at my house at 8 the next morning. She had no idea what I was planning to make sure she found instead. My phone rang less than an hour after I got home. Vanessa. I considered ignoring it, but answered. Lilian, can we stop being ridiculous now? Her voice had changed. The smug confidence from dinner was gone, replaced by the softer tone she used whenever she wanted something. I already gave you my answer. You love the kids. I do. Then what's the problem? They love staying with Aunt Lilian. There it was. Not a request, another attempt to make refusing sound cruel. I walked into my bedroom and pulled an empty suitcase from the closet. Loving them doesn't mean I'm automatically your babysitter. Vanessa sighed. You've watched them plenty of times before. She was right. There had been Friday night emergencies that somehow became entire weekends. Times she'd promised to return at 6 and appeared close to midnight. I'd bought groceries, paid for movies and activities, and rearranged my schedule because the children were already expecting to stay with me. Once, I'd canceled an entire weekend I'd planned for myself because Vanessa had told them they were sleeping at my house before she'd even called me. Every time, I'd eventually given in. Those were favors, Vanessa, I said. Helping you before didn't give you permanent access to my time. Silence. Then she said, the trip is non-refundable. I stopped packing. So we've already paid for everything. And you did that without confirming childcare. Another silence. This one lasted longer. Finally, Vanessa snapped. We didn't discuss it beforehand because we knew you'd make it complicated. I slowly sat on the edge of my bed. That sentence explained everything. This wasn't poor planning. They had deliberately avoided asking me, because asking meant giving me the opportunity to refuse. You booked a 6-day vacation, I said, knowing I hadn't agreed to watch your children. Because you're their aunt. And I'm telling you now, do not bring them to my house tomorrow. Vanessa gave a short laugh. Mom and Dad agree with me. Once the kids are standing there, you're not going to turn them away. My grip tightened around the phone. So that was the plan. Put 2 children on my doorstep and make me choose between surrendering or looking heartless in front of them. Vanessa. 8 o'clock, Lilian. She hung up. Seconds later, another message appeared. Mom. Please stop being difficult. Your sister deserves this trip. I began typing. I have spent years helping Vanessa. I have canceled plans. I've taken days off work. I've paid asterisk. I stopped, then deleted every word. Explaining myself had never changed anything. So I opened my laptop instead. I pulled up the reservation I'd quietly arranged before Christmas and checked the confirmation one last time. Confirmed. Then I packed. At 5:40 the next morning, while the neighborhood was still dark, I carried my suitcase outside. Before leaving, I taped a sealed envelope beside my front door. Across the front, I had written one name. Vanessa. I locked the house, put my suitcase in the car, and drove away. At 8:07 the next morning, Vanessa's SUV pulled into my driveway. Derek was driving. Vanessa sat beside him, while their 2 children were in the back surrounded by backpacks, overnight bags, and enough clothes for 6 days. Their airport luggage was packed into the trunk. Mom and Dad arrived directly behind them. They hadn't come to say goodbye. They had come to make sure I surrendered. Vanessa climbed out and marched to my front door. She rang the bell. Nothing. She rang again. Lilian. Still nothing. She pulled out her phone and called me. Straight to voicemail. One of the kids looked through the car window. Mom, where's Aunt Lilian? She's probably inside, Vanessa said quickly. Derek frowned. You told me she was expecting us. She is. Then why isn't she answering? Vanessa ignored him and hammered on the door. That was when Mom spotted the envelope. Vanessa. She pointed beside the door. My sister ripped it down. Her name was written across the front. What is this nonsense? She tore it open while everyone stood around her. Then she read the first line. Her expression changed. Derek stepped closer. What does it say? Vanessa didn't answer. Read it, Dad said. Vanessa finally did. I said no last night, and I am putting that answer in writing because you told me you plan to leave your children here anyway. What? Derek said. Vanessa crushed the edge of the paper in her fist. She actually left. Unbelievable. She turned toward Derek. Get everyone back in the car. Start driving toward the airport. Mom and Dad can keep calling her. Derek didn't move. Vanessa. What? His eyes stayed on the letter. Did Lilian ever agree to watch the kids? Vanessa glanced toward our parents. We discussed this. That isn't what I asked. Dad stepped forward. Derek, this is just a misunderstanding. Derek looked at the children's packed bags, then at Mom and Dad standing in my driveway. A misunderstanding doesn't require 4 adults to pressure one person into saying yes. Vanessa's face tightened. Can we not do this right now? We're going to miss our flight. Derek stared at her. You told me Lilian agreed weeks ago. You said she only started being dramatic about it last night. Mom's mouth opened. Dad looked at Vanessa. For the first time that morning, nobody was blaming me. Vanessa quickly looked back down at the letter. There's more, Derek said. It doesn't matter. Then read it. She unfolded the page completely. Her eyes moved across the next lines. Mom stepped closer. What did she write? Vanessa's jaw tightened. Vanessa. Finally, she read aloud. And before anyone says this is the first time I've abandoned this family. She stopped. Derek reached toward the letter. Finish it. Vanessa swallowed. Then she read the last 3 words. Turn the page. Vanessa turned the page. It wasn't an angry letter. It was a list. Dates, weekends, holidays, times she'd asked me to babysit during the previous year. Mom leaned closer. What is all that? Derek took the paper. He read the first few entries silently, then frowned. March 18th. You told me your parents had the kids that weekend. Mom immediately shook her head. We didn't. Vanessa reached for the page. Why does this matter right now? Derek moved it away. He kept reading. There were birthdays I'd missed, weekends I'd canceled, and supposed emergencies that had left the children with me for hours or days. Dad recognized another date. Wait, that was when you said Lilian volunteered because she wanted time with the kids. Derek looked at him. She told me you two offered to take them. Nobody spoke. The pattern was suddenly obvious. Vanessa had been telling each of us whatever version made her plans easiest. An emergency to me. A volunteered weekend to our parents. Grandparent childcare to Derek. Her phone buzzed. Vanessa looked at the time and went pale. We need to leave. She started calling babysitters. The first was unavailable. The second couldn't take 2 children on such short notice. The third quoted a holiday rate that made Vanessa snap. For 6 days. She called the airline, then the hotel. Every conversation made things worse. Finally, Mom said, maybe your father and I could take the children. Dad turned sharply. Diane, we have plans. Derek slowly looked at him. So did Lilian. Dad said nothing. Vanessa's face flushed. This is ridiculous. Everybody's willing to destroy our vacation just to prove Lilian's point. She began firing messages at me. Where are you? Come home. You're making us miss our flight. My phone buzzed miles away. I read them from the driver's seat during a stop, then typed one sentence. Somewhere I chose to be. I turned my phone off. Back at my house, Vanessa shoved the letter toward her purse. But Derek caught the page. Wait. Near the bottom, one paragraph had been folded underneath Vanessa's hand. Give me that, she said. Derek pulled it away. Why don't you want us reading this? Derek, we're already late. He unfolded the page. Vanessa stepped toward him. Don't. But he was already reading. His eyes moved across the paragraph, then stopped. He slowly lowered the letter and looked directly at his wife. Vanessa, how long have you been doing this to her? Derek held the letter while Vanessa stood frozen beside him. What does it say? Mom asked. Derek read the final paragraph aloud. I had written that Christmas wasn't the beginning of the problem. It was simply the first time I'd refused to participate in it. For years, I'd allowed temporary favors to become expectations because every attempt to say no ended the same way, with guilt, accusations, and Mom and Dad insisting that family came first. Then, a month before Christmas, Vanessa casually mentioned traveling after the holiday. She never asked me about childcare. That was when I suspected what was coming. So I'd made my own plans. I booked 6 days at a mountain cabin and deliberately told nobody where I was going. And after Vanessa explicitly said she'd bring the children regardless of my answer, I put my refusal in writing. The final lines were simple. I loved my niece and nephew. But from that day forward, I would never accept childcare that was demanded, assumed, or arranged without my agreement. Derek lowered the paper. You booked this vacation before asking her. Vanessa folded her arms. I knew she'd help. That wasn't my question. Vanessa looked away. Derek continued. And you told me she'd already agreed. Silence. Mom stepped forward. Lilian didn't need to handle it like this. Derek turned toward her. Then why should Lilian cancel her plans? Mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She finally looked at Dad. George, maybe we should take the kids. Dad immediately stiffened. We have plans, Diane. Nobody needed to say anything after that. The hypocrisy was sitting right there in my driveway. Derek picked up one of the children's bags. We're not leaving our kids with someone who didn't agree to take them. The trip was canceled. Vanessa and Derek lost part of what they'd prepaid and had to pay additional fees while rearranging reservations. But the bigger loss for Vanessa was something she'd taken for granted for years. Automatic access to my time. Derek made one rule clear afterward. No future vacation would be booked until childcare had been confirmed directly with the person providing it. Mom and Dad tried, calling me repeatedly that morning. I didn't answer. By then, I was already at the mountain cabin I'd booked for myself. The next morning, I woke to snow gathering outside the windows and dozens of missed calls on my phone. I made coffee. I silenced the phone. And I sat beside the window without feeling obligated to rescue anyone. I didn't cut my family out of my life afterward. I simply stopped negotiating my boundaries. Months later, Vanessa needed childcare again. This time, she called. Are you free Saturday? Sometimes my answer became yes. Other times, it was no. And when it was no, there were no children suddenly appearing on my doorstep. No packed bags. No parents arriving to pressure me. Vanessa learned to ask instead of announce. Mom and Dad learned that calling something family didn't automatically make it my responsibility. And I remained the aunt who loved spending time with my niece and nephew without being treated like their unpaid third parent. For years, I thought being a good sister meant always being available. That Christmas, I finally learned that love can be freely given, but access to my time still requires my consent.